you never want an administrator at the top. And I know you feel you actually don't want administrators anywhere. You definitely, at the top leadership, you need entrepreneurs. And so our goal is to change the mindset of business leaders and to train a new generation of entrepreneurial leaders.
Most organizations say they want leadership, but what they actually install at the top of the leadership chain are administrators. In this episode, the third and final part of our special series on venture mode, Escape the Administration Trap by Finding and Unleashing Entrepreneurial Leaders, I'm joined again by Professor Mark Packard, co-author of the book. We confront the hidden cost of that mistake and define what entrepreneurial leadership really is, why it's different, and why it's becoming essential in a dynamic, innovation-driven economy. How do firms introduce entrepreneurial leadership? We'll describe a new institution, a new accreditation model, and a new cultural vision for how businesses develop leaders who create value rather than manage decline. In this episode, you'll learn why administrative leadership fails and what entrepreneurial leadership replaces it with, how the Entrepreneurial Leadership Institute, the ELI, challenges traditional accreditation and business education, and why restoring entrepreneurship isn't just an economic fix, but a cultural shift towards human-centered value creation.
This is the Value Creators Podcast, your source for a new kind of business education, escaping from business administration mode and entering dynamic entrepreneurship mode. We're guided by entrepreneurial economics, which is the source of all growth and positive change for businesses of all sizes in all markets. We talk to experienced experts in value creation so that there's business learning for you in every episode.
Mark, welcome back to this third part of our special Value Creators Podcast edition, talking about our book, Venture Mode, Escape the Administration Trap by Finding and Unleashing Entrepreneurial Leaders. So we're going to talk a question about entrepreneurial leaders and entrepreneurial leadership. And I think we should define what you think of, or we think of, as entrepreneurial leadership in contrast to the kind of leadership that the MBA programs and universities are always telling us that they provide.
Yeah, we kind of talked about this the last couple of episodes already, but the traditional leader of the business is a trained administrator, trained to think scientifically about how to run their business effectively. And I get the impulse for that. I think it's kind of intuitive. It's how society has kind of learned to think about improvement. But entrepreneurship is not really a scientific process. You can kind of think about entrepreneurship as akin to science. In fact, there's a scientific approach to entrepreneurship in entrepreneurship theory, but you can't study business, you can't study customers exactly as a scientist. There's so much more of empathy, of innovation, of judgment in entrepreneurship that is outside of this kind of scientific paradigm, this checklist efficiency mode. And we want to train our students to think more as entrepreneurs rather than administrators, because administrative leadership, I mean, it can work at the lower levels of an organization to run a project, I guess. You never want an administrator at the top. And I know you feel you actually don't want administrators anywhere. And that's fair enough. I think you want everyone to be at least partially, somewhat entrepreneurial, but you definitely, at the top leadership, you need entrepreneurs. And so our goal is to change the mindset of business leaders and to train a new generation of entrepreneurial leaders.
Yeah, so we talked about the old style of leadership having been institutionalized. And what we meant by that word is that it's locked into the business education process. It's what everybody talks about as leadership, the great administrators. We mentioned in the book that when you welcome in a new government, you welcome in its administration, which is all the departments and department heads and methods and regulations and so on like that. So our idea is to deinstitutionalize or create an alternative institution. We're calling it ELI, the Entrepreneurial Leadership Institute. And then, so I'll talk a little bit about the business model, Mark, and then you can talk a little bit about its accreditation role. So we see the Entrepreneurial Leadership Institute as a consortium of businesses who come together recognizing this problem that the leadership that's being foisted upon us, the administrative methodology that we have been forced to follow, is detrimental. It's hurting our business. And we want for business in general, for everybody to escape that trap and enter into this new entrepreneurial venture mode world. So we would see gathering a group of like-minded businesses. It's possible that they're not the biggest or at least the oldest businesses out there that you tend to think about as institutionalizing these things, but the bright, young, up and coming, growing, not necessarily just Silicon Valley ventures and unicorns, but those mid-sized businesses that we never seem to talk about, but are always sensing that, hey, we've got to innovate, we've got to break into new markets. We can't afford administration because we've got to be more efficient and leaner and faster and more innovative than anybody else. So those kinds of businesses, there are plenty of them in America and in the world everywhere, and that they could come together and that they could fund, firstly, the new kind of education that we're talking about, but secondly, the dissemination of this idea that administration is detrimental, it's hurting businesses, it's hurting the economy, it's hurting everybody's real wages, it's hurting job opportunities, it's hurting everybody. And venture mode or entrepreneurial leadership is a way out of that, a way to higher growth rates, greater opportunity, steeper curves, and everything that we desire. And that's what these companies want. And so we think that they would come together and fund that. So the research, I was talking to a professor from Ohio State called Angus Fletcher the other day, he's got a wonderful uh, body of research about what he calls story, that the brain is a storytelling machine, not a logic and reasoning machine. And the way he applied that was in the army with special operators who are always in volatile situations and need, a special style of dealing with the environment and the volatility and the rapid change they face. And that's a good parallel. We would have the same kind of thing for entrepreneurial businesses, that we can do that research, we can help them develop the mentalities and the way of thinking and the leadership that will get them through that volatile economic challenge as opposed to volatile conflict challenge. So the Entrepreneurial Leadership Institute would do that. But also, you described earlier, Mark, and we talked about the book, the accreditation problem, which is that accreditation as it currently stands is a cartel. So you've got to teach administration because the administrators insist that you do, and you can't get another permission to do that. So tell us the role of the Entrepreneurial Leadership Institute as an alternative to or an innovation in accreditation.
Yeah, yeah. So at least in the U.S., I don't know. Actually, I think it's worldwide. Business schools are accredited by what's called the AACSB. It stands for the Association to Advance Collegiate Schools of Business. Um, and the purpose of this accreditation body is to ensure that all the schools are teaching the same standard curriculum. And of course, that standard curriculum is administration mode. And so all the business, there's virtually no innovation. I mean, there's a little bit here and there, and the AACSB encourages little innovations here and there, but everybody needs to teach the exact same scientific method, the scientific accepted body of scientific knowledge in management science, including entrepreneurship, which kind of drives me nuts a little bit. And what's worse, I think, is probably that they'll like force business schools to increase their bureaucracy, to measure, capture metrics of performance and how they're doing in all these little. And so the whole process of accreditation is instilling more and more administration and bureaucracy. Anyway, this idea for an ELI, this Entrepreneurial Leadership Institute, is similar in purpose to the AACSB. We want to have some kind of credentialing body to replace the AACSB and the accreditation machine. And the reason for that is because legitimation matters. Legitimacy matters in terms of who can you trust? Who do you send your kids to school to? Who do you go to if you're a business to train your employees? So legitimacy matters, and we want to provide that for students, for businesses, but we don't want to use the existing accrediting bodies because they don't know what entrepreneurial leadership is. And so what we are looking for is a body of business leaders who are entrepreneurial leaders themselves, who understand what entrepreneurial leadership is and can accredit, if you want to use that word, or at least legitimize schools, including our own MBE, but we're not so bold or overconfident to presume ours is the only or even necessarily best solution to the undersupply of entrepreneurial leaders problem. And we expect other people to come up with new business school alternatives also to ours, and they should be considered also. And so the ELI will sponsor and assess those curricula and programs also.
We're delighted to announce the Value Creators online course. For entrepreneurs in every kind of business, big, small, or medium, at every stage, in every industry, our course provides the foundations and principles on which to build success. Simple, clear purpose and principles give rise to creativity, innovation, and competitively superior business action. There are 11 foundational principles or mental models that together cohere into the value business model. Principles for value generation, principles for value operations, principles for value finance and accounting, and principles for value sustainability, as well as the new knowledge accumulation you'll need for continuous innovation. These principles are delivered by top business professors from top business schools: Mark Packard, Per Byland, Gordon Miller, David Rapp, and Bart Vanderhagen. You'll find video lessons from them, along with downloadable tools, processes, and other valuable content. Master these lessons, and you'll master the most important skill in business: value creation. Go to thevaluecreators.com and click the course link.
Yeah, and I say two things about that, and we say this in the book, Mark, that the accreditation bureaus of today are saying, we approve of this education because we're giving it and we're telling you it's right. And our thinking about validation is that the the consortium of firms, the hiring corporations are saying, we like these graduates. We find that these graduates come to us with entrepreneurial leadership. They're improving how we do business. So that's why we like it. It's not that it's legitimized by the provider. It's that it's validated by the buyer. So we like to hire these graduates. I'd also reinforce your second point, which is that the ELI can be a generative platform. I learned that term from Mohammed Kihani at one of the business schools, but uh, he talks about uh, a generative platform is one that lets the user create all the innovation. And so if we get the MBE right and we get the ELI right, as you point out, individual firms, new teachers, consultants, they can come up with new forms of education that do a better job of creating entrepreneurial leadership. They can have specializations in industries. They can have uh, specializations of education for different stages, from startup to maturity to growth. We don't want to impose anything on anybody. We want there to be a great outgrowth of all kinds of new forms of business education. So that would be ELI. The other thing we talk about in the book is uh, you said that the MBE in the business school is always trying to standardize. One of those standards is best practices, and another one is the case study method. And we're saying you can learn from corporations that already exist, but it's a different form of learning. So we talk about some of the companies where entrepreneurial leadership is already exhibited. I'll mention two. One is Morningstar, the Morningstar company in total, who've already said, we want no managers, we want no layers. Everybody signs a service contract with those internally that they're serving. Here's what I'll do for you. Here's what I expect from you in return. They call it CLOUs, colleague letters of understanding. It's new, it's different. It's not a best practice. It's an outlier. It's a new way of doing things. It's done really well. So let's look at those outliers. We talk about another corporation in China called Handu, which is it's also like Hire, that is very familiar in case studies, that the front line is the entrepreneur. It's young people making websites to sell fashion and other kinds of modern goods. And then it's all of those websites are wired back into a standard technology platform to do the payment layer and the order transmission layer and the logistics and all that kind of stuff, and then a back end of factories, but it's all automated. So the leaders are the people at the front end dealing directly with the customer. Is that a universal business idea? We don't know, but it is an outlier, and we can look at those outliers, and it stimulates the ideas that, hey, there are different ways to do things that are not administrative. So those are the kinds of let's call them cases, or let's call them anomalies that the ELI could look at and help people to do different thinking.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the goal is to look at these not as this is the way it should be done. Of course, like as you said, this is the goal of the ELI is just to ensure that this could be this is their what they're doing is a legitimate service. It might be what you want, it might not be. It depends on what you're looking for. But we've assessed the organization, we've assessed their process, and it's legitimate.
Yeah.
And then we'll see who wins in the marketplace. But that's it, right? We're just making sure that these are legitimate businesses and not frauds, essentially, right?
So we can invite the consortium members to come to the ELI. Tell us a little bit about what success will look like. And we're not quantitative people. We're not mathematicians. What's success going to look like for our sponsoring corporations?
Well, so basically, who we expect will be our founding corporations for the ELI are going to be these businesses that really see the problem. They're feeling the problem. They're new hires. Um, it's taking them months to find new hires. They're gambling on them because they don't know enough about these new hires, and they're getting too many new hires that turn out to be lemons. They turn out to be bad eggs that just aren't good cultural fits, that are problems. And those, when you hire a problem employee, it costs a lot to the organization, right? In terms of loss of productivity, loss, the opportunity cost of loss, of, you know, the time and effort it takes to fire that person and then retrain somebody else. Um, and, and it just alters the culture of the organization in ways that are really bad. And so, the selection mechanisms that companies have now are terrible, right? They basically have to stalk people on social media or something, right? That to figure out what their values are, what they really think, and or whatever. Borders on the creepy. Um, uh, or you just get a few hours at most talking to them in person in an interview, and those are obviously the candidates are putting their best foot forward. They're saying all the right things. That doesn't mean they believe them. That's not necessarily who they really are. Um, in fact, a not insignificant percentage of the population are on what we call the dark triad. The narcissism, Machiavellianism, or sociopathy. Right? We have plenty of sociopaths in the world that can manipulate and deceive people quite well, and so what companies need, I think, and we'll find plenty of companies that this resonates with, is some better screening mechanism, and that's part of what our MBAs. That's a huge part of what the MBE is meant to do. Is like we get a lot of time with these students to assess who they are, what their values are, what they can do, and so we can act as the selection, the screening mechanism for these sponsoring corporations. We could provide that service for them. But um, there can be a lot of different ways to do that, and so these type of organizations that are looking for something better, these are the ones that we think will be the first ones to help us out with this Entrepreneurial Leadership Institute. They're looking for better ways to find employees and build their organization with a strong culture, and so they can help us build the legitimacy of the MBE, build the legitimacy of other non-accredited schools, not just business schools. They could be engineering and other medical, whatever schools. But we need some sponsors to step up and help us build that legitimacy so that we can really grow this project.
Yeah, and you mentioned the big word there, Mark, which is culture, and thinking in terms of the whole as opposed to the parts, the whole ELI as opposed to individual companies, the individual jobs and hires and so on like that. One of the things that we hope for ELI is it can change the culture of thinking about business. So you read things like Gallup polls these days, and you find that, especially among young people, Gen Z, there's a tiny level of trust in business. People hate business. The the last one I looked at Gallup, I'm not sure what year it was, 23 maybe or 24, but have a great amount of trust or a good amount of trust in business. Those two numbers combined is like 17%, meaning most people think business is untrustworthy. And that's what administration mode has brought us, the concentration on reducing costs. So you think of people as cost, you think of customers as cost because customer support is expensive. The processing that takes out the joy and emotion out of interacting with business. We've created this culture where we think of business as extractive and exploitative. and there's no joy in it, and it's anti-human. And you and I think the opposite is the case. There's nothing more joyful than bringing new subjective value to customers, improving their lives. I think you and Per Byland called it one time the service ethic or the entrepreneurial ethic, which is trying to make people's lives better and getting rewarded for it because the marketplace wants that. And so I would hope that the ELI can contribute to that, to reverse the way of thinking. And it ties to your point about positivism, which is a horrible, negative, non-human, awful kind of philosophy, to what you call subjectivism, which is the joy of human difference and everybody working together to improve lives and be innovative and have creative ideas, all of that stuff. I think there could be a massive cultural, philosophical, ethical shift where business is this joyful effort to improve everybody's lives. So I hope I'm not being too ambitious there.
Well, no, I don't think so. And at the beginning of this episode, you were talking about how probably look at these medium-sized businesses looking for something better. But I'm increasingly seeing some of the biggest businesses in the world recognizing exactly these problems that we've been talking about and looking for something better. Right? In fact, I gave a talk not too long ago, and on this topic, and it occurred to me that there's not a single business in the world that got to be a huge business that got to be super successful without an entrepreneurial leader at its head. All the big businesses, when you look at them, when they got big, at least they had an entrepreneurial leader in leadership at the top. And so I think the whole world is looking for something better. I mean, not all of them really see this problem, but when we present it to them, if they ever listen to this podcast, I think it'll resonate with just about everybody,
Yep.
because this is a real problem.
Yeah, and it's an American issue of the moment, but it's how America got to be great, which is those entrepreneurial leaders. I remember doing some research into John D. Rockefeller of Standard Oil, who was identified by some yellow journalist as one of the robber barons, and that that's the exploitative and extractive nature of business that he's accused of. But you go in and read about him, and he was highly conscious of the fact that if he could get the cost of kerosene down to low levels so that everybody could afford it, and he could make it clean burning, and he could make the lamps last longer, and all of those kinds of things, it would improve people's lives. They would get to work at home at night when the sun went down, which they weren't able to before. Nobody could afford candles. They were the expensive elite option that weren't available to everyday users. And he's thinking about the family getting together at home with the new kerosene burning lights and so on like that. It's very emotional and quite touching when you read what he wrote. And that's true of Edison when it switched to electric light, and it's true of Ford, whatever bad things to say about Ford getting everybody affordable cars. But it's how we got here. And it's different today. It's NVIDIA chips, and it's AI, and it's Google, and all of those things we know about. But the ethic should still be there, and I think we can draw it out. So I'm glad to hear you say
Yeah.
everybody looks to that improvement.
Yeah. And I'm hoping that more business schools get on board with this. I'm very fortunate to have a very supportive dean. And I'm hoping my school will actually get involved in the ELI itself. I shared the book with my dean. His name's Daniel Gropper, and he's an excellent dean. But yeah, he's constrained by the ACSB, the accrediting machine, and so we'll see what happens. But there are some really great business professors out there um, that see this, and hopefully they get involved also. But there's um, yeah, business is in entrepreneurship in particular is the driver of a better world. it's the most beautiful thing. That's why I love being an entrepreneurship professor, is I get to teach students, hey, this is how we make the world better. And if that's the way you think, that gets you up in the morning, right? Hey, every morning I'm getting up and I'm going to make my customers' lives better.
Yep.
And I think the world needs to hear that.
Yeah, and everybody can make that contribution if they think the right way, and everybody can be entrepreneurial leaders. There's an image from the special operators that Professor Fletcher talks about as wolf packs. Everyone's a leader, and then if somebody comes up with a better idea, or has an innovation, or finds a pathway that nobody else has found, then others will follow. But fellowship is not the norm. Leadership is the norm. Everybody can be a leader, because it's leadership defined as putting the first step into the new pathway. So our new thinking about leadership is relevant. So let's wrap up there, Mark. The book is called Venture Mode. To repeat, it's Escape the Administration Trap by Finding and Unleashing, there's the energy in it, Entrepreneurial Leaders. There are 3 sections to the book. So the first one covers how the MBA got to be the dominant method, how administration got to be the dominant way about thinking, why we got into this mess. The second part is about venture mode itself, how it applies, how it can evolve, some of the great practitioners of venture mode, some of the great pathways to venture mode, and how it applies to every possible business. And then the third section is about the MBE and the ELI, the alternative to the MBA and the Entrepreneurial Leadership Institute. So by the time we release the podcast, the book will be available. It'll be on Amazon. We'll publicize it on thevaluecreators.com. I'll put it on hunterhastings.com. You're on LinkedIn. Is there any other way you want people to find you besides LinkedIn?
I'm also on Twitter at MD Packard, or X.
Yep. Yeah, we're going to call it X now. That's the innovation.
Yep.
Yeah, good. Okay, so we'll make all those links on the transcript of the podcast, and that'll be on Substack. So it's the Value Creators Substack. And we hope that you buy the book, enjoy the book, and join the Entrepreneurial Leadership Institute.
Yeah, come join us in this hopefully new movement toward venture mode.
Yep. New movement is the right way to put it. Mark, thank you so much. I've enjoyed being a co-author with you, and we love communicating these ideas. So we'll do it together.
Awesome. Thanks, Hunter.
This has been another episode of the Value Creators Podcast. Thanks for listening. You can visit thevaluecreators.com for links and resources related to this episode. And check hunterhastings.com for more content on entrepreneurial business management based on value creation principles.